Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. Today I'm going to be creating a French country tray using Redesign Moulds and Decoupage. For my project today, I'm going to be using this little charger that I bought at Christmas time, and I'm going to begin by using Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white. I'm going to be applying one coat, and then I'm going to allow that to dry for about an hour. Then I'm going to come in with my second coat and give that a few hours to dry. The primer is going to make sure that my paint sticks to this slick surface and stays there, and it's also going to block that gold colour from coming through my paint. Next, I took out Paint Couture's Simply White chalk paint. I'm going to be applying 2 even coats over the top of my white primer. That white primer definitely saves a few coats of white paint. I want white as my background to start off with because I am going to be decoupaging in the center, and adding white allows the colors of the decoupage paper to show to their best advantage. When my paint was dry, I took out Redesign's Chirping Bliss Fibre Paper. This is a pack of 3 A3 papers. These are still available in a few places, Etsy and eBay. You just need to do a bit of a Google search to find them. I used that first paper on a book project in my previous video. I also really love this one. It's 2 smaller designs, but I'm going to be using this third paper for my project today. I really only want to have the decoupage paper in the center of the tray in a circular shape. So here I'm just working out how much of the decoupage design I'm going to use. I definitely want to have the birds and try not to cut too much of that off. I also love the branch design. So I'm just working out how much I am going to be able to use. I then took out Paint Couture's Decoupage Medium in Matte. I'm just going to be applying the decoupage medium to the center part, only where I want my decoupage paper to go. I'm going to be applying a generous coat. I always use a lot more decoupage medium when I'm working with Redesign's fiber paper because it's a lot thicker. Now, I am not going to trim out the birds. I didn't trust myself to get the shape right, so I thought I would just add the decoupage paper into the wet medium and trim that paper back a bit later. So here I am just positioning the fiber paper into my wet decoupage medium, and then I'm going to begin to smooth it out. I'm not worried about that crease in the center there because that does disappear. I'm then going to go over the top of the fiber paper with some more of my decoupage medium, again being a lot heavier with it, just making sure that I'm only getting it in the center part of the tray. Redesign do have a decoupage gel medium that is supposed to be really good to use with this heavier paper, but as I said, I just tend to use a lot more of my decoupage medium. Now, if you don't have access to this paper, you could definitely use any other kind of decoupage paper or even napkins for this kind of project. I then took out my hairdryer. I like to immediately hit my decoupage paper, the fiber paper, with heat as soon as I get that medium on there. When I'm working with this, I find that that helps the paper to stick really, really well. So I'm just going to apply heat over the center part until it's dry. I then took out my craft knife and I'm going to very carefully go around the edge and start cutting back the paper. I'm being careful so that I don't go too far and start pulling off the paint, but this is a thicker paper, so you are going to have to press a little bit hard. So I'm just making small little cuts and then lifting the paper up and gently cutting that paper away. This was a little bit tricky, but in the end, it definitely turned out well. I knew that I was going to be adding molds around the outside of it, so it didn't have to be perfect, but this is the best way I could think to do it. As I said, I didn't trust myself to cut a circle that was big enough or perfect to go in the center. So this was the easiest way I found. Once I had the excess paper cut off, I went in with another layer of decoupage medium to seal those edges. When that was dry, I took out Redesign's Lavish Swirls mold. I'm going to begin by adding some cornstarch. This is going to help my clay to release. And I'm going to be using this mold today with Das Air Dry clay. You can use resin if you want. I'm just going to work that clay a little bit and then I'm going to start pressing it into the design. So I did originally cast the entire design, but you will see soon that I end up just using part of it. So I'm just going to work that clay into the mold. You can see I'm pushing the excess clay out. If you have any issues getting your clay out, I would suggest popping it in the freezer for about 10 minutes before you take it out. Or as I said before, you could use resin if you are more confident using that. So once I was happy with how that looked, I had all the excess clay out, I then began to bend and flex the mold. This is definitely going to help that clay to release if you flex it before you try to take it out of the mold. After flexing the mold and helping that clay to release from the sides, I then flipped it over and I'm curling it back to release the casting. Another reason that I really like to use clay on projects like this is that it's very flexible. So I'm going to gently position this in place and I can arrange this however I want. As I said, I do end up pulling off some of that excess clay and I'm having a bit of a play with how I want it arranged. So in the end, I decided to have it like this, and then I went in and cast another 3 of this mold, but you can see I'm doing partial castings. If you're going to use resin, you could use hot glue to create a sort of like a little dam in your mold to stop the resin going any further. So I'm going to continue to cast those other pieces and I'm going to have them positioned in 4 different parts on that tray. Once I was happy with how that looked, I took out Redesign's Salon de la Paix mold. I really like this little design down here. It's almost like a bow, but it's quite a unique design, and I wanted something small enough that could fit in between each of those Lavish swirl castings. So I'm going to be casting 4 of those, and as you can see, it does fit pretty nicely there. I do end up trimming off the excess little ribbons that are on each side of that design. I felt like that would be a little bit too busy to keep those on there, so I'm going to trim them off. Once I had all of my castings organized, I used my Sealy's Quickset wood glue on the back of my castings and I went around and carefully glued them down. I'm not too worried if I get any breakage because they are glued back together pretty easily. And I am gluing these down while my clay is still wet. It's definitely advisable to do that because you want to be able to mold that clay to the surface of your project. And if you wait for them to dry, they're not going to be flexible and they'll just break if you try to bend and manipulate them. So I'm going to glue down each of those little smaller designs in each of the gaps, and I'm just having a look at how all of this is laid out to make sure it's as even and sort of symmetrical as possible around the edges. I let my clay dry overnight and the next day I came in with Abundance mineral paint. As soon as I put this down, I felt that it didn't really go with the look that I was going for. I was definitely leaning more towards greens given the tones that are in this particular decoupage paper. So I do end up switching over to Vintage Moss mineral paint. I'm just going to go straight over the top of that Abundance mineral paint, and I'm going to be painting the entire outside of the tray in this beautiful green. I felt like it tied in really well with the decoupage paper designs. Now the decoupage medium is like a sealer, so even though I am going over the top of that paper to get at all of the details in the center of those castings, I am able to use a wet wipe to wipe back that excess paint where I have it that I don't want it. So definitely keep that in mind if you're going to be doing this sort of a layered look with decoupage and molds. Make sure that you have that paper sealed really well so that you can wipe back any of your errors. So I'm going to go around, and I ended up doing 2 coats of the Vintage Moss, and the Vintage Moss, being a mineral paint, does have a built-in sealer, and I'm going to be layering other products over the top of that later on, so that's definitely important. If you're using a chalk paint, make sure you seal that paint before you come in with any of your other products over the top. It just makes life a lot easier. You can wipe it back as much or as little as you want. Once I finished painting and cleaning up the excess paint from the center, I took out Van Dyke Brown Antiquing Glaze and I'm applying it over the top of my dry mineral paint. As I said, this paint has a built-in sealer, so I can wipe back as much of this glaze as I want, and also from the paper obviously as well. So I'm then going to go in with a wet wipe and I'm going to pull it back from the top, the high points of those castings. I'm going to allow it to sit in the grooves that are around the outside of the tray. I'm also going to allow it to build up around the outside of the molds. I really want this glaze to create definition, to also give us more of a vintage look. That's definitely my style. However, if this look wasn't for you, it was too grungy, obviously this is a step that you could leave out. Once I finished applying the glaze, I took out Paix Couture's Emerald Luxe Metallic. I'm going to go in and start adding that to the high points of my castings. I still want that glaze to sit down lower. I'm also going to use Amazon Luxe Metallic. I'm layering that in over the top. I've still got that emerald there that is still wet, and I'm also going to layer in some meadow. So I am swapping between those three different Luxe Metallics to create this sort of moody green look. I wanted to do something a bit different today. I wanted to bring in some colors. I loved the greens that were in the decoupage paper, so I thought, why not be a little bit bolder and add in some of these metallics and do something a bit different. So I'm just going in, I'm also adding it to the low points, but I am then picking up a wet wipe. I'm going to pull a little bit of it back from the lower points on the tray so that it's a little bit more of like a patchy, worn look in those sections. As I worked around the tray, I continued to layer the emerald and the Amazon. I held back on adding any more of the meadow. That is a lighter metallic, so I decided I would go in a little bit later with that one to create a little bit of that sort of tonal contrast and interest. So at this point, I'm just going around with the emerald and the Amazon. These are subtly different tones. Obviously, the Amazon is a bit more green. The emerald has a bit more of a touch of blue, and I just felt like the combination was just really lovely, and again, tied in beautifully with the colors on that decoupage paper. If I inspire you to try any of the Redesign or Paix Couture products used in today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate links. You will find them in the description below. Once those layers were dry, I did come back in with that Meadow Luxe Metallic, and I'm going to hit just some of the high points to bring in that slightly lighter tone of green. As I said, just on the high points, I'm not going to be adding it to the low points. I just want a little bit of contrast there. When that was dry, I took out Paix Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic, and I'm going to begin by adding that lightly over the top of the smaller Salon de la Paix molds that we added in between. I really wanted to bring in another color, something that would stand out a bit more, that would further highlight the beautiful intricate details of these castings. I'm then going over the top of the Lavish swirl castings with the bronze. Again, I'm not going in too heavy. I don't want it to be overpowering. I don't want the bronze to overpower those beautiful green tones that we've layered in, but I did want to have just a contrasting color to just sort of finish it off and bring it together. So I'm just going to continue to work my way around adding that bronze and just really sort of highlighting those beautiful curves. Now, if bronze wasn't to your taste, you could definitely use antique gold, or I thought even perhaps a silver would have looked nice with this particular design as well. I then moved on to adding it to the outside rim of the tray, and I just have my brush going over the edge with a little bit of product, not too much. I'm happy for it to skip over certain areas so that it looks like perhaps that bronze is sort of worn away over time. And here's a look at our finished tray. I love how this turned out. It was so fun to combine those molds and that decoupage paper and to use a bit more color in my project today. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find a full product list and my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks for watching.